Hello and welcome back to the Football Heritage podcast. I'm your host, Rory Bryce, and today I'm joined by Alan Lau of the Frank Soo Foundation. Alan, thank you very much for joining me on the show today. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thank you for inviting me.
Not at all. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much for dedicating your time to coming on and speak with us today. Some of our listeners might know the Frank Soo Foundation from recent media work that they were doing, particularly around Stoke Football Club. And as the name suggests, their objective and their, I suppose, purpose for existing is to remember and sort of promote the life and legacy of Frank Soo, who was the first player of Chinese origin and heritage to play within the English game. He's a really important figure within English football, and one that sadly probably hasn't got the recognition that he deserves, as we know from talking about other players from different minority backgrounds who end up playing in the different leagues over here in the United Kingdom. So we're going to talk a little bit about his life and legacy today, as well as some of the work that the Frank Soo Foundation have been doing in order to promote his story. But just before we kick things off properly, Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role within the foundation?
Yep. So my name's Alan Lau. I am the co-founder of the Frank Soo Foundation. We set up the foundation in 2017, but I've been working in grassroots football for about 10, 15 years now. Starting off with, I set up my own team for the Chinese Community Centre. It's quite interesting because I was doing a lot of voluntary work for the Chinese Community Centre, and it was with the youth club. And at that time, I did my FA coaching badges, and I wanted to take the kids. Just wanted to coach the kids and get them involved in grassroots football. But the centre manager at the time was a bit negative on me taking those kids out, and the words were, um, the parents won't like it, and the kids will get dirty and sweaty, and yeah, the parents won't like them doing that. And for me, growing up in England, loving football and just being obsessed with it with a kid, to hear that, I think, well, kids are supposed to get muddy
Yes,
and dirty, and that's what you're supposed to do, right? Because of that, I created the adults team so that it'll be something for the kids to, eventually go into when they grew up. And then from there, I did loads of leagues. I did a lot of stuff in the Chinese and East Asian communities, mainly in London, but we did tournaments across the country too. And I think a lot of that, it was great. I loved doing that, but then I think there was still something missing. And when I heard about the story about Frank, that was the final bit because, as I said before, I'm obsessed with football, but it's always something that, you know, people from our community never did. You play grassroots and then, go to university, get a job. But when I heard about Frank's story, I mean, I didn't really believe it at first. But then it was one of those things where I thought, this is the missing piece. This is just the person. This is the thing that we can, just change the narrative, I guess, and get more people from our communities involved in football. So that's a bit about the beginning of my journey, I guess.
that's brilliant, and I quite like as well how you've pointed to Frank Soo and his story as being the origin, as you said, of people within your community then having a role model to look to say that you guys can actually play football. Do you know what I mean? And it's
Mm.
it's interesting, and there's a lot of things that we can talk about within that as well in terms of representation and people having role models that can look to and all that sort of thing. But I suppose Frank Soo is one of many players of, as I mentioned earlier on, different backgrounds and different heritages who played across the country, who other people are now looking to and saying, well, wait a minute, if they could do it, then why can't I? And normally they come from communities where, as you mentioned, traditionally might not play as much football or make their way up to high in the professional game, just for lack of a better term. But now that these stories are being told, more people are actually doing so, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's something that we'll talk about a little bit later on. But just so our listeners know, if you haven't heard of Frank Soo, he was an English player and manager. Played mainly for Stoke. I think, as you mentioned, Alan Alfair, he was the Stoke with the club who he was most associated with throughout his career. But he also played for Leicester, Luton, and Chelmsford City later on in his career. And he had some managerial career as well. It took him all the way to Scandinavia, managed in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and actually managed the Norwegian national team as well in the 50s. So he had quite the career. And, well, as we've mentioned, his father was from China. I think am I right in saying he was a sailor and then he opened a laundry, and that's when he met Frank's mum, and he had a number of siblings. It's an absolutely incredible story. But the thing that jumps out to me is that whereas now we look to these people to kind of inspire others and show them that there are role models and for interesting stories, but at that point in time, it was just like it was any other footballer.
Yeah, and I think it's quite interesting when I speak to his family, and I think some of the older generation of his family, they're proud of the fact that a family member played for England,
Mm.
but it never really clicked. It's just another family member. Whereas now I think for me, coming from a Chinese heritage, it means a heck of a lot, and I'm hoping that the stuff that we do and telling this story, it it might be that thing that helps someone be more involved in football. Might not just be in football, but in general, because I think it's a very inspirational story. But I think coming back to the point, it's quite interesting because I think when I talk to the family too, Frank would probably think, "What's going on here? Why is everyone making so much of a fuss?" Because I think it was a very different time back then,
Of
where
course,
But then saying that too, he was very well regarded by his peers
it was.
and quite a media sensation in the sense that even his wedding was reported on. And back then, people weren't. It wasn't like nowadays where people follow footballers and the wags and all that kind of stuff. Back then, it wasn't reported on, but for some reason, he had that sort of star quality that people were interested in his story, were interested in who he was marrying. There was over 1,000 people turned up for his wedding.
Wow, absolutely incredible. So he really, really kind of was one of the first superstars of football down here as well. And it's really interesting how so many people turned out for his wedding and just kind of followed him so closely as well. So there is obviously this fascination with him out with being such a good footballer as well. But I mean, when he played, it was absolutely fantastic. It wasn't just that he was a player that came and went, and he played a bit part because he was absolutely phenomenal as a player, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing that tells me how great a player he was that he was a captain at Stoke. He captained Sir Stanley Matthews, and Sir Stanley Matthews should be the gold standard of the day. And to be said in the same breath as him and to be his captain, he must have been good. I mean, he captained the Stoke team, he captained Leicester, captained Luton. He also captained the RAF team when he was playing for the forces. So he had those leadership qualities, and all the all the feedback I get from the people who've done the research on him, and he's the quality of the player was exceptional. He was one of the best players of the time.
Yeah, and I can imagine, and this is what's quite good about the story as well, is that Frank passed away in 1991 when he was 76, but that still leaves it within living memory for many people. There were people, presumably, who might still be alive today who actually seen him play as well, and that's quite important and actually quite valuable when you're looking to preserve the memory and tell someone's story, is that you have these oral accounts that you can draw on. But of course, as well, you mentioned that he got an England cap, and while there was a lot of fascination with Frank and his history and what he was doing at the time, the fact that he got an England cap and that he remains, as far as I'm aware, the only player of Chinese heritage to get an England cap is exceptional in itself as
I'm
well.
gonna Can I just stop you for a second
Sure.
and correct you slightly?
Uh huh.
He played for England 9 times in the wartime, but he wasn't given an official cap
Okay.
because at that time they weren't giving caps to people because they were deemed as just friendly games. A lot of the games were against other close countries, so it'll be Ireland, Wales, Scotland.
Right. I
So,
see.
and that's one of the things that we are trying to do is to actually get Frank a honorary cap,
Hmm.
because this is a person who has represented his country, and there has been a precedent set recently of the FA giving honorary caps.
Hmm.
So with Jack Leslie,
Yep.
I'm not sure if you know much of his story. So a couple of years ago, his family received a honorary cap, and we're trying to do the same thing with the FA to try and get an honorary cap for Frank's family too.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it would make sense, as you said there, he represented his country, so why shouldn't he be given one? And I get there is this there is this kind of weird thing with wartime caps because it wasn't being played during what you would call a regular time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to an extent, I understand it, but I still don't think that should mean that players shouldn't be given caps,
Yes.
because at the end of the day, you still need to be one of the best players playing at that time to be able to get capped. So I don't see why it should be an issue for that, for them to get an honorary cap. So I'm guessing part of the work of the foundation has been to actually campaign for that to happen. And how has that gone for the foundation so far?
Yeah, I mean, the FA aren't in the business of just giving away caps. So we understand that this is a very important and I mean, they have to consider this very hard. But I feel recently with the work that we've been doing with the Hall of Fame, with the National Football Museum, and just as the story being told now, I think there's no better time than now really for them to reconsider it, because I think we've got the support of a lot of people in football.
Mm.
A lot of clubs are very behind it, and this is something which I feel would affect and benefit everyone from different ethnic backgrounds in football, because it is one of those things where, it is that whole seeing and believing thing, isn't it? So, yeah, I think it's hard. It's been very hard.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, I also work for the FA.
Okay.
I work, well, I work for the EDI team, and I do, I'm a community champion, and I'm an ambassador. So I'm in those rooms, but we're still fighting. And no, I'm hopeful that it's going to happen very soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be difficult. I mean, we've mentioned on another episode, I think it was an episode on the first Matildas, about the recognition and the battle that it took for the Scottish Football Association to reward caps to many of the women footballers, including Rose Riley, who obviously won the World Cup with Italy, but is Scottish born and raised, but played in Italy and became a naturalised citizen and so forth. So when we talk about these issues of representation, although that is slightly different, it can be very difficult, and it can be difficult for a number of reasons as well. But as well as his caps for England that you guys are fighting for, as I said, he also had a very good managerial career, and somehow he ended up pretty much charting a bit of a course all over Scandinavia, obviously Finland as well. He was in Helsinki. So how did that come about? Because it's quite an interesting managerial career, even for that period of time where some of them can be a little bit all over the place.
I think what it was too, at the end of his career, he did have issues at home with his family. Sadly, his wife passed away. So maybe that plays into why he didn't settle in one place for long, and that's probably one of the reasons why he might have left the country. Because I think the other thing too is that he was building those sort of relationships at the end of his career, and he was already in Scandinavia before he finished his playing career. So it is very interesting, and it's quite fun too. Because last year we actually went to Stockholm to interview the last surviving member of Djurgården's IF, who won the league with him, Hasse Twinig.
Brilliant.
He's in his 80s now, so he's still very, very active. But yeah, not many people left now from that sort of era, and I think there is actually still quite a lot of research we need to do in Scandinavia to chart his career there, because a lot of the material, a lot of the information is in even Norwegian and Swedish, and we haven't had the resources yet to actually go through all the newspaper cuttings and all the things to see where his life took him over there. But it is really interesting, and yeah, I mean, next year will be I think it's the 70th anniversary of that league win.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, hoping to go over there and join in the celebrations in some way or other.
Yeah, that would be great. A perfect time to have some kind of celebration for him in any case. And of course, obviously his career begins to wind down, and he sort of just adapts to life post-football, I suppose, as many of them do, as you'd like to call it. And as I mentioned earlier on, he passed away in 1991. So obviously, I guess this is where the foundation comes into it, because this was a story that I wasn't aware of until, maybe I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. But as far as I'm aware, his story seemed to sort of fall by the wayside slightly. And then, of course, the foundation was founded in 2016 with the aim of picking that up and really carrying it on.
I wanted to say a big shout out too before that is to Susan Gardiner, who wrote the book The Wanderer, the story of Frank Soo, where if it wasn't for her and her efforts, I don't think this story would have resurfaced.
Okay.
And I think us at the foundation and a lot of us, we owe a debt of gratitude to her for all the work she's done there. So yeah, just big up to her. Her book is still available. So coming up to Christmas, it will make a very good Christmas present.
Absolutely, I'll put the links to that book in the show notes, and we'll put it out on X, etc.
But I mean, the thing for us, so as I mentioned before, I've been doing things in grassroots football, but setting up the foundation, and then I think the other turning point for me personally was COVID and the lockdowns, because there was a lot of negative things towards our communities.
Certainly was.
I was furloughed. I was sitting at home looking after the kids, and when you doom scrolling and you see all those things,
Yeah.
and then it just hit me that, like, if we all do that little bit to help our communities, what a better world this would be. And that sort of coincided when the Google Doodle came out. So you know how sometimes Google has those like a doodle on the landing page. They did one for Frank in 2020, and that was a time when there wasn't any football going on, and it was to commemorate his first England game. And then that sort of was the firing gun for me and the foundation. That was like, okay, let's go, let's do more stuff now, because we've got the platform now. People are interested. We need to tell the story. We need to do our bit.
Yeah.
And then from that, yeah, just coming out of the lockdowns, doing more tournaments, doing more coaching, getting more kids involved. We've got a very good partnership with Watford Football Club.
Brilliant.
We also try and do similar things with other clubs around the country, where we try and train up coaches from our own community and bring the kids from our community in, and yeah, it sort of just sustains itself. I'm hoping that they will see other people that they can look up to who are their coaches, and a lot of times they're just the parents.
Yeah.
So they were originally set up as community events, but then we sort of press gang the dads and mums to to get involved. So it's sort of, yeah, getting communities involved in football, really. I mean, that's one of the big major parts of what the foundation is trying to do, as well as tell the story, and as well as trying to advocate and be a voice for the community, for people from East and Southeast Asian communities. So we're doing a lot of work with other organisations like the FA, like Kick It Out, and just telling the story, really.
I think it's a brilliant platform to do it as well, because obviously you're marrying the story of Frank with doing good within the community, and actually doing things to inspire more people to take up the game, play it properly, but also to teach respect amongst communities as well. When, as you said, especially coming off the back of COVID, a lot of people forget that there was a huge amount of anti-Chinese and anti-Sino sentiment going around. So I think it's brilliant that you're then taking this, spinning it into a positive, or as much a positive as you can, and then teaching people that respect is something that is good and will take them further than hatred. And obviously within the grassroots game, that's massively important as well.
The thing with football too, being the national sport and being the thing that binds us together a lot, I think to teach people in our community of how to be involved in that, and then showing people in the wider communities, like, we're here too. We're just like you too. We love football. We do the same things. There's very little differences between us, So I think it's marrying those two things, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, but it's also about breaking down these barriers and making sure everyone has access as well. But I think what I quite like about it is that you saw the Google Doodle, and you just decided to strike while the iron is hot, because that is so important when we're talking about things that trend, and not this is a trend, but you use that to really shoot yourselves off and to use it as your platform, which has been brilliant. And the rewards have been coming thick and fast for you guys, because just recently, I think it was actually last week or the week before, you were at Stoke doing an event to
Yeah.
commemorate Frank's life and legacy. Of course, next year it's going to be coming up to the anniversary of Stoke being granted city status, so there's maybe something you can tie into it there. But you've done work with the National Football Museum as well, and this story is really starting to be put into the spotlight, which must be great just to be recognised for the work that you've done.
Yeah, 100%. And also big thank you to Stoke and the National Football Museum for making it all happen, and also to Sky Sports News who've covered it. And I think with that side of things, with the media side, there's very few media stories about positivity with Asians in football, not just East Asians, but even South Asians. Is always the stories that always get picked up is racism or something's happened, right? So for them to pick up this story and run with it and do the whole piece for us to talk about Frank and also how he's inspired the next generations and how that thread and that theme, I think it's quite cutting edge, and I think it's really important too because although yes, racism is an important thing to talk about and we all should be aware of it, but let's talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about, how many goals you see East Asians score or how skillful these players are, and celebrate those things because that's also important, and that's the thing that that's what brings a smile to people's faces, and that's what brings people together too, rather than racism and stuff, which sort of the not so nice side. So yeah, a big thank you to all the people involved last week, and also we did a thing. So Frank, as you said earlier, Frank did play for Chelmsford and he managed St Albans.
Yeah, that's right.
And last week on Tuesday, it so happened that it was actually St Albans versus Chelmsford.
No way.
Just a few days after the Hall of Fame. So we got in contact with St Albans and they loved it. We went down and we did a big thing there. And the really interesting thing is actually Chelmsford were supposed to play in a county cup game, and that game probably most times would not have happened because usually cup precedes league. But we wrote to the Essex FA, and a big shout out to them too because they've done something quite unprecedented, and they saw the value of what this game meant and what it how this affects football. So they've allowed they postponed the cup game so this league game could happen. So I think that shows too that people in football are understanding what the story means and the significance. And if you can get a county FA to change something like that, I think that's quite a big thing.
That's a massive thing. It just goes to show that, as you said, they're aware of the impact. You guys are aware of the impact, and they know and they acknowledge how important it is as well. And obviously, kind of memorial fixtures are played all the time, or commemorative fixtures. But it's great to see it come around organically almost. Like, you don't really get that often, and I think that's quite nice to see as well. And it's because you've seen this, obviously, the fixture's going ahead, and there's going to be this commemorative aspect to it as well. So, yeah, I think that's really good and a really, really nice way to kind of bring the story to more people as well and make people aware of the impact that Frank had on these clubs, the clubs that these people support, and that their family members may have supported when he was playing or managing them as well. I mean, you kind of touched on it already, but obviously quite a kind of prominent thread through this chat has been about, I suppose, sort of role models and who people are able to look to. And obviously every kid is going to have their Messi or whoever that they're going to look to and think, I want to be like them. But I wanted to ask you, just how important is it for people to see members of their community be role models as well, particularly if they're not as present within football in England or Scotland or whatever else?
Oh, massively. I mean, there's that adage of you can't be if you can't see it. And as I said before, like a lot of it, for me when I was growing up, my heroes were Michael Owen and Alan Shearer, that kind of generation. But I hope that now that people from our communities can see people that's done it. I mean, he played for England. I mean,
Exactly.
right. So
Yeah,
if he can do it, and he would have faced a lot more hardships, a lot more, the challenges that he faced,
Hmm.
we probably wouldn't really understand.
Exactly.
Okay, so if he can do it, what's stopping the next person? What's stopping the next person from a Chinese heritage, of Asian heritage? And I think that translate to anyone really too. How if someone could, with all the things stacked against you, yet you can still take it on your chin and perform and become so good and get to the top. What's stopping you? So
Hmm.
I think for me, that's my take on it. What I want to give to other people too.
Hmm. Yeah, that's brilliant. Of course, Frank would have played and managed and just generally worked through the time of the Red Scare and everything else that was going on surrounding China at that time. So he would have faced, as you mentioned, disadvantages and racism and hardships that we can't understand, and that are much different to how the things are today. Do you know what I mean? So, as you said, if he can't do it, then why can't others as well? But his story is the same as so many other different players and managers from across the home nations who've underwent similar. I think I mentioned off air, Arthur Wharton. There was Andrew Watson from Scotland, who was the first black international footballer, as far as we know today, and captain of Scotland as well. And what's kind of developing is this. It's almost like this little network of stories that are happening throughout the it's kind of difficult to put, but more and more of them are coming out, but they're still sort of fragmented. So, although they're kind of different contextually, I just wondered if you had any thoughts on how we marry these stories together so that we can create kind of wider narrative around representation and people from different backgrounds and heritages within football in the UK.
I think the first thing I'll say is that I've come on to say thank you to everybody because I've had a lot of support from the Arthur Wharton Foundation and also the Jack Leslie campaign. And I think we do have a sort of little network ourselves supporting each other. And I think sometimes we need to support, and also there's times where we need to let people have that space too, because there is a finite amount of space for people and how much they will take in. So it is a case of here's our bit, cool, brilliant, and now let's shine a light on the next bit, and then shine a light on the next bit, and shine a light. And I think when you do that together in a holistic way and work together in that sort of way, I think that's when the full picture comes out. And I think I'm sure there'll be other stories coming out in the next few years that will be of similar and of just be as inspiring. And for me, I'd like that to happen, and I want to help shine their light too. So I think there's a lot of stories out there, and I think it takes just for some mad person like me to go and take the story and run with it, I guess. And I think most of the other guys at the Ark Alton we're all a bit mad, to be honest.
Yeah, everyone's. I mean, that's the thing, and with anything to do with heritage in football, you need to be a bit mad to dive into it because these things are very much like voluntary most of the time. So you do need to be a little bit mad as well. I guess through the work that you do, you'll have seen firsthand the impact that people's stories like Frank's can actually have on people as well. Is there anyone who you've actually coached or I suppose, given access to football who has went on to play for anyone within the English pyramid or anywhere else?
I think for us, it's quite early days. I mean, as you said, we've only been going, well, relatively since 2020 when we really went for it. So only 4 years. So, but then even the kids that we coach, I mean, for me, is not about. I mean, obviously, it'd be great to have the next Frank Soo, but for me, it's changing that perception that anyone could be that kid, anyone could do that, and it doesn't have to be just the people that we're coaching. It's about telling that story and affecting people's perception on if they can do that. Um, so yeah, and I think what's happened quite recently, I've seen a lot more activity in the East and Southeast Asian communities regarding football, not just in men's football, but also in women's football. Women's football is really, really taking off. And that's not just on the back of the Frank Soo Foundation and the work we do, but is also generally in this country, women's football and girls' football is doing so well now. I mean, I say that, I'll caveat that with it's getting better. So, naturally there are more people who want to be involved. So, and I think for us, it's good to just be there if they need help. I mean, a lot of times they do come to us, and we've hosted tournaments for people, and we're always supportive of all the things that are going out there. And I think it's just building a movement, really. I can't give you any specific on specific players, and to be honest, I'm I'm not very keen on spotlighting young talent too early, because as we know in the industry is, you know, anything can happen, and you don't want to build someone up too much. So, but there are kids that we have noticed in academies and doing the rounds and trying to break into football. And for us, as long as we can be there to help guide them and center them and point them in the right direction, that's all we can do for them, really. And just show them what has been done, and is up to them to really strive for it, I guess.
Yeah, I think, like you said there's a number of sort of players and managers who are up and coming from the Southeast Asian community and the Asian community as a whole. I can never. So in Scotland a couple of years ago, I think a member of the Asian community was managing Fort William. I think he came up from down south. But obviously Celtic, the women's team had
Yes.
Sean Munglu for a while, who's an absolutely phenomenal footballer. She was brilliant, especially going into the second half of last season. And yeah, there just is a lot more players and managers coming through and being given opportunities as well, which I think is just as important. Obviously, as you mentioned, it's been a very busy spell for you guys, and it's going to be getting busier as well, especially into next year. What is the future or the plans for the foundation, I suppose, within the next year or so to continue the work that you guys have been doing?
I think the first thing, as we mentioned before, is a cap, and really going for the cap, and lobbying the FA for that. Things are in motion at the moment. And then I guess next year is just building on a lot of the work that we did this year, in regards to some of the research, um, about our communities in football, and also just replicating some of the programs we have already, and try and build it into other places around the country, I guess. So there is a lot of work to do. We're also going for our charity status at the moment, just getting the paperwork together for that. And we're hoping after that there'll be, yeah, we're looking for that next level. We're looking to strive to be to be more of a voice for our communities. And I think, yeah, we're heading in the right direction there.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, that's what everyone wants to hear. You want to be able to continue this work, being able to put football in these places which need it most. And again, as we've talked about, just keep inspiring people and using this story to inspire people, giving people role models, and yeah, just continuing doing good work within the community. And at the end of the day, that's what grassroots football and organisations like yourselves should be striving to do, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, 100%. I think you mentioned it a bit earlier too, how it is like a two-pronged attack with
Mm.
the story, and then also providing the pathways, or at least helping and supporting those pathways. And there's a lot of organisation that does one or
Yep.
the other, but to have them all together, I think that's the most powerful thing we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you as well. And this has been a really, really fascinating chat, Alan, and I hope all of our listeners have enjoyed hearing the story about Frank Soo and all the different things that you guys have been doing to help inspire people through his story. Is there anything else that you want to add just before we finish up for today?
I think it's just by the book, really. The Wanderer, the story of Frank Soo by Susan Gardiner. Because
Yeah.
as I said, we owe her a massive, um, debt of gratitude, and without her work, our work would not have happened. So
Yeah, exactly. And that's all you can ask for. Of course, as I said, we will put information of that book and where to find it within the show notes, just so that everyone else can pick it up if they want to. Of course, for all our listeners, thank you very much for tuning in once again. If there's anything that you want us to cover, whether it's related to football history or heritage, then please get in touch with us. You can reach us on X, that's @_footy heritage, or you can email us at hello@footballheritage.co.uk as well. But for now, Alan, say goodbye.
thank you very much. Bye bye.
It's a goodbye from me as well. We'll see you all again next week. Goodbye.